Hello. Hello, Nathan.
Hello.
Thanks so much for being here. We're going to go ahead and play your video. Did you want to say anything before we start?
Yes, I have a 1 week old child, so I was a little tired when I recorded this. So I made a couple mistakes, including dates and a couple numbers. Bonus points to you if you catch them. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll be in the chat as well.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Let's get started.
Today is Monday, 17th August 2020. It is difficult to create applications. The language is difficult. It is very difficult to write programs in other languages. Does this look strange? This is how reading texts are translated into your language when you are not feeling well. Let's try that again. Today is Monday, August 17th, 2020. Making apps is hard. Language is hard. Writing apps in other languages is really hard. Is this sounding a little funny? This is what it feels like to read text translated into your language when you don't internationalize properly. Hi, welcome to Internationalization for English. My name's Nathan Fennel. I'm a senior software engineer at Uber. I've been developing apps for about 8 years, back in the pre-ARC days, also known as the dark days. I've worked from startups to giant companies developing applications that are used by individuals. I actually once built an app for the Pope, so literally one user. And I've built apps that are used by hundreds of millions of people. So I've really gone the full gamut on it, from I'm the only person working on it to whole teams. And my goal through this talk is to make you as passionate about internationalization as I am. Why internationalize? It's one of those things that we all know that we should do, like documentation or eating a salad. We know we should do it. It's better for everyone when it's done well, and it takes work to do, but it takes more work not to do. And we pay the price later for taking shortcuts earlier. And so internationalization is one of those things that if you take care of early in your development process, it's cheaper and it's more effective, and it's better for your end users if you do that early rather than later. Paying users expect a premium experience. If a user is paying to use your app, then they expect to experience a feel that is tailored for them. And so if they're experiencing your app and they're using it through a lens that has been poorly internationalized or localized for them, they're not going to feel like they're getting that premium experience. Free users, your app spreads by Net Promoter Score, and that is entirely based off of how good of an experience those free users have and how much they are going to share that with their friends and their family and their colleagues. And so if you internationalize and localize properly for those users, the free users, your NPS goes way up and you get a higher adoption rate. Additionally, foreign markets are big business. All of your users probably don't reside in the United States. Even if they did, they probably don't all speak English, or they probably don't all prefer to speak English. But foreign markets, there's big money to be made there. 72% of iPhone users prefer to use a language other than English. So that means that if you want to expand your reach, you can get nearly 4 times as many users if you just begin adding more localized languages. 12% of all mobile game revenue comes from the Chinese market alone. That is one set of languages that if you internationalize and you localize to, you can reach 12% of the global audience. So let's quickly break down the difference between internationalization and localization. Internationalization is the preparing a product to be used internationally. So this is where you actually work on your code and your strings files and you get your product ready to be able to be imported and localized into different languages. So localization is creating content for specific locales. So this is like, I've developed my app, but I want it to be able to be used by French users who only speak French. So I will translate everything and make sure that it's available in French. So internationalization is a really long word. It's often abbreviated I-18N, or I, 18 letters, the letter N. Localization, the same thing with L-10N. So if you see these phrases, just know they're really long words, I-18N. Internationalization is more than just strings. It also includes images, icons, colors, and dates. It includes more than this. It's a whole lot of other little things that it's really hard to catch until some user says, hey, this doesn't look right. But just be aware that internationalization isn't just about your text. So why treat English as a foreign language? Why internationalize for English? When I actually told my manager about this talk and I gave him the title of it, he thought it was clickbait. He thought I was just joking about the title. But I was very serious. Instead of treating English as a first-class language, instead you're treating all languages equally. You're allowing other languages to be promoted to a first-class experience. So let's talk about the benefits of treating English as a foreign language. Treating English as a foreign language right from the get-go allows you, as you're developing your app, to encapsulate all strings and keep them in a separate file that is easier to edit. Files are ready to send to linguists for translation. Code is easier to read. If you don't have raw strings muddying up your code, and instead you have references to other files where all of your strings are contained, then your code is cleaner and easier to read. Correcting text becomes an isolated experience. You don't have to have developers who are trying to figure out where does this comma go or where does this period go. You can outsource that to linguists or product managers or designers. You can let your developers develop, and you can let your product people make product decisions. So here's what we normally do. As indie app developers, we try to create an app as quickly as possible, and we rapidly produce it, and then we write all of our copy for English. So all of the text that we have in our entire app is written for English. We release our app in English. Then we realize international demand. We have users who prefer things in a different language, or we start seeing the statistics and show that 12% of our users are actually preferring a non-English language, and they're getting a mixed experience. So then we fix our code to handle more than one language. And this takes a long time. We have to go through our code and we have to go find, okay, where did we put this reference and where was this one? And are we doing this? Are we doing that? And we have to get all those raw strings out of there. Oh, what did we do with dates? Oh, this isn't a problem. And so we fix our code. But then we endlessly deal with the internationalization issues. We get bugs from other users saying this isn't translated properly. Why did I get charged for this? How did this go through? And we start to realize, oh, we didn't quite update our UI for handling these situations. Or we didn't handle the translation for this. Actually, there was an issue with YouTube Music. For 18 months, instead of saying play this playlist, in Russian it said pay this playlist. And no one caught it for 18 months until YouTube Music actually hired someone who spoke Russian and asked, why is this translated this way? And then finally, after going through all that headache, we decide to finally internationalize our app. And we do it right, and we get the app out to more and more users. Now, there's a better way to do this. Instead of internationalizing last, instead, treat English as your first international language. So, this is what internationalization for English is. Rapidly create an app. Internationalize our app for English. Write our copy in English. Then release our app in English. So far, the only difference is we threw internationalizing our app for English right at the beginning. But now we realize that there's international demand. Now we just have to write our copy into more languages. We've already fixed the bugs by evading those bugs right from the beginning. And so now we get to enjoy seeing our users love our app all around the world. And this is an amazing experience. When you write something and you're like, I don't speak Russian, I don't speak Hindi, but I can make an app that can be used by users all around the world. And I didn't have to worry about it. I got to let linguists deal with the translations, and I just got to deal with creating my amazing user experience. So, how do you treat English as a foreign language? Even if you only speak English. Do not allow any raw strings in your code. Absolutely none. If you see strings mixed in with code, move them over to another file. You can do this through extensions, you can do it through enums. There's a whole array of options for how to handle this. So, what would that look like? You've probably seen something like this before, where we've got class, my view, and then we let menu label equal menu, and we've got this label.text equals string, and we've just got this raw string. And maybe you've even seen an extension where you localize it from here. You add no comments, the string is still mixed in with code, or you're trusting that every developer on your team goes through code review specifically for linguistics. That doesn't happen. So the best practice is just not to let any raw strings in your code. Use internationalization libraries whenever and wherever possible. There are a ton of internationalization libraries. ICU has a whole bunch, but even within iOS, there are so many that you can just start using right off the bat. A few of the ones that are built in the Foundation and UI kit include date and number formatters, calendars. The ISO 8601 date formatter is an amazing library and fixes so many problems. I actually use the Japanese calendar on my phone specifically because apps do not use the ISO 8601 date formatter. So one of the apps that I use allows me to check out audiobooks from my library. Now, when I check out a book, I can only use it for 2 weeks. And so it says, okay, today is August 18th, and so I need to return this in 2 weeks on September 1st. Well, I need to return it on September 1st in the year 2020. However, I use the Japanese calendar, and currently it's the year 2. So I have 2018 years until I need to return my book because they rolled their own ISO 8601 formatter and didn't use the one built into iOS. This is a big one that I see all over the place. Everyone misses. And it's one of those things that if you do right from the beginning, makes every change to your copy through the entire life of your app so much easier. Write detailed descriptions of every string you plan on using. If you have a string, write a description. Don't just restate what the string is, but actually describe what that string is being used for, where it is, what it can be used for, what the user might interpret its use for. What do I do with strings? Remove all strings from your code and put them in dedicated files. As I mentioned earlier, you can use extensions and put those into separate files. If you need to use namespacing, then you can create separate files and classes and structures for getting those strings. So one of the easiest things to do is just write an extension right on top of string. And so in this case, I use a static var for the word menu, and it returns a string. And so what's encapsulated inside of that is a comment that explains to the linguist, as well as future developers, what that string is intended to be used for. And the call site for this has a really easy dot notation to be able to use this string. An important question here is, do you use vars or do you use functions? Vars are really nice, no parentheses, really clear. Vars don't accomplish everything that you want strings to do. Functions are sometimes necessary. And a function allows you to pass in a parameter to actually be able to interpolate strings or be able to add a number or context or a name into a string. So now we're going to run through 10 Tamagotchis. Sorry, that was supposed to say 10 Tamagotchis. Never let AI create your slides for you. Okay. So, calendars. Don't assume that everyone uses the Gregorian calendar. iOS exposes 3 calendars for users: Gregorian, Japanese, and Buddhist. As I mentioned before, I use the Japanese calendar to be able to exploit the fact that people don't handle calendars properly inside of their own apps. So the rule of thumb here is that if you're showing it to the user, use the current calendar. If, however, it's not being shown to the user and is instead being sent to another service or another API or even internally inside of your app, explicitly declare the type of calendar that you want to use. Generally, that's Gregorian. ISO 8601. So this is actually a standard for how to transmit and communicate dates between different services. Don't roll your own. Use the one built into iOS. People try to be clever and say, oh no, I'm following the standard perfectly, but they always mess something up or they miss something, and it's really easy to do wrong, and it's very hard to do right on your own. So I highly recommend just using the one out of the box built into Foundation. Truncation. You can't just make assumptions about where words are broken up. Some languages have words that actually get longer when truncated. There was a notorious bug on iOS a few years back where if you sent someone a specific text and it had Arabic text inside of it, that when it previewed on your screen would crash your phone. And this was because iOS was expecting the string to get shorter when truncated and actually got longer. So the rule of thumb here is don't make assumptions about truncation. Some languages prepend differentiating text while others postpend it. So sometimes the important text is at the beginning, sometimes it's at the end, sometimes it's right in the middle. Like where we put adjectives changes depending on the language. Don't just assume every language is like English, and be careful with where you truncate words. Current locale, or auto-updating locale. So this goes back to the same rule of thumb with the calendar. If it's being shown to the user, use the current locale. If data is being sent to another program or another service, use a specific locale and be explicit about this. Number formatting: decimals, commas, groupings. Decimal points can be periods or commas, so use number formatters. Millions, billions, milliards, and billiards, use number formatters whenever you're going to convert between Arabic numerals and text. Another really interesting complexity with number formatting comes from India, where 1 lakh is equal to 100,000, but the way that it's written is 1, 0, 0, 0, 0. This is different than the 3-digit separations that we're more used to. And then you have 1 crore, which is 10 million, but it's written as 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So again, that's 2 zeros, 2 zeros, 3 zeros. Use number formatters. They take care of all this headache for you. Don't try to outsmart the system and put commas in where you think they should be or decimal points where you think they should be. Capitalization. Capitalization can change the meaning of text. Some languages don't have capital letters, and some don't have lowercase letters. Sometimes it's all just the same case. Georgian just recently added capital letters to their language just a couple of years ago. Use the string functions localized lowercase and localized uppercase when appropriate. Plurals. There's more than single and plural. In English, there's one and plural. I've got 1 taco, 0 tacos, 5 tacos. It's singular taco or not singular taco. But in Romanian, there's 0, 1, 1 through 19, and then many. And then in Slovenian, there's 1, 2, numbers that end in 3 or 4, including 103, 1003, and then there's everything else. So in Celtic, there's 1, 2, 3 through 6, and then 7 through 10. And then everything else. And I don't just mean that there are different cardinality for it, like first, second. I mean that the actual pluralization of nouns changes depending on the quantity. So if there are 3 things, you might use one plural ending. But if there are 10, you'd use something else. And if there were 100, again, a different type. Gendered nouns: masculine, feminine, and neutered. English doesn't have gendered nouns, but does have gendered pronouns. So aim to use the neutered form whenever possible. And include gender as a field when possible. Again, this relates to functions. If you're passing in a user's username or a user's name, this is where it'd be really nice to be able to have a gender field inside of that string function. If you can't handle that now, or you're not prepared to, or you don't want to sink the time into being able to do that, instead you can just have a default parameter value for this and just say it's the neutered version for now, and deal with that at a later point in time where you do start to handle more nuanced languages. Another Tamagotchi is string length. Strings are never as short as you want them to be, and they're always longer than you think they ever should be. And this problem shows up everywhere. Labels, buttons, explanations, menu options, the list goes on and on and on. In general, assume that strings are not going to be the same length in every language, or that they're not even going to be able to fit in every single place. Sometimes you will have to truncate. Sometimes you'll have to split lines. Be prepared for those options. Another interesting complexity with string length is the actual character count. How long is a string? In Japanese, 2 Unicode characters are used to create one Japanese character. So if you tell a linguist string must be less than 60 characters, do you mean 60 characters in that language or 60 Unicode characters? Is that 30 characters? Is that UTF-8, UTF-16? You really need to specify those things if that's the limitation that's going to be placed on your strings. However, I highly recommend against this and don't put artificial limitations on the length of strings. Left and right. Use leading and trailing. Not all languages are written left to right. Use leading and trailing instead of left and right whenever laying anything out. If left to right ordering matters, it probably makes more sense to embed the content in an image. So in conclusion, language is hard, but getting it right is absolutely worth it. Internationalization is important and can really help your business and your app out. Incorporating internationalization into your product early saves time and money later on. So this has been Internationalization for English. I'm available for any questions that you might have. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was such a great talk. Very
Thank you.
useful. I don't see any questions in the Slack channel. Everybody's like commenting on your excellent video skills. And
yeah, it seems to be pretty well received.
Yeah. Is there anything that you want to add?
I did mention this in another thread on here. The idea and the overlap between internationalization and accessibility. And I've started to use the term globalization in terms of software development and product development to cover making your product or your app globally accessible, because they go hand in hand. Making labels that can adjust to any length string also work really well for adjusting to different font size for people who can't see as well. So yeah, if I had more time, I would have gone into more details on how you can like kind of glob these things together and basically start your app out as though it's going to be released globally, even when you're in beta.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there's one question. What tool or tools do you use for handling getting translations into your project?
Oh, if it's just me, just mine, I have a couple scripts that basically take the strings output file from Xcode and turns it into a CSV file, because that works in just about every software. I have not found a good management tool that is affordable for managing translations. So I've generally found just CSV files for sharing with linguists work really well. Mm-hmm.
And I think we have time for one more question. Any do's and don'ts for the detailed descriptions of your display strings?
If the rule of thumb there is, if you can give that description to a child and they would come up with the actual original text, you've done a good job. Until then, you can probably add more description. No one ever says, I think that was too much detail for a translation.